Good evening. Welcome back to Tutti Tavola. On behalf of Corrado Paina, our Executive Director, and the Italian Chamber of Commerce of Ontario, I would like to welcome you to the June series of our online cooking experiences with Chef Roberto Fracchioni. I hope you enjoyed the Pecorino Toscano class last week. This month, we're proud to welcome the Loft Cooking School at Longo's, our new sponsor. The Loft Cooking School is currently closed, but Longo's looks forward to welcoming you back when they're open again, doing classes like this in person. Check out the longo's.com website for all the details. We at the ICCO had a great time at the Loft last fall when we brought three visiting chefs from Italy presenting their specialty dishes during our week of Italian cuisine in November. We will show you some images of these past events and our long-term collaboration with Longo's we're so proud of. Today, Roberto Fracchioni, chef professor, food consultant, and brand ambassador in Canada for the prosciutto di Parma, will take us back to his patio and show us how to prepare shrimp scampi with vegetables on the grill. Don't miss the upcoming classes for three more mouth-watering recipes the chef will prepare with us using the best ingredients, all sourced at Longo's. Just a quick reminder that the ICCO is offering a special membership rate for all of you who will contact us through Tutti a Tavola. The Italian Chamber of Commerce of Ontario is a business organization and primary provider of effective commercial support for trade and business relations between Canada and Italy. So contact us to find out more about our services. We hope you will continue to follow us next week, next Tuesday, when we will prepare grilled steak and polenta with burrata with the help of Chef Roberto. And now, enjoy the images of last year's Taste of Calabria with visiting Michelin star chef Antonio Bruzzino and our own Chef Roberto. Some of the images refer to the cooking demos and tasting events that took place at the Longo's Loft. After this, we will be going tutti a tavola, to the table. Buon appetito!
Forgot how short my hair was in November. Welcome everybody. I'm Chef Roberto Fracchioni, and I'm going to be leading you through a little shrimp scampi today. So we're out here on my patio. It's like 40 degrees, but we have some incredible products to cook with here. So a quick trip to Longo's, you can find everything that you need to do this dish. Really nothing technically difficult at all here today. First thing we want to do is turn on our barbecue. So just going to put this on to medium heat. I'm going to talk a little bit more temperatures once we get cooking, but we just want it on medium heat here. Again, it's 40 degrees out here, not the middle of winter. We don't need to preheat our barbecue for an hour. We just need 5 minutes for it to get warm. So we're going to start with a couple of the other ingredients here today. So with the dish itself is a shrimp scampi. Shrimp scampi, it's based on shrimp. It's an Italian American sort of dish. I'll get into that a little bit later too. but we're pairing it with some roasted potatoes, a little bit of mushrooms, and some asparagus. So first thing we want to get started with is the potatoes. So this is kind of one of my go-to potato dishes. It's super easy. It's something that I always do whenever I'm cooking on the grill. And all we do, very, very, very simple, is take a paper. So just a piece of parchment paper. We're going to grab a few little pieces of shallot. So these shallots here, these are called chicken leg shallots. I don't know why they call them chicken legs. That's just what they call them. They're a lot longer than the short, like more oniony looking shallots. These shallots tend to be a lot sweeter and a lot softer. They're more on the onion side than they are on the garlic side when it comes to flavor. I always use the chicken leg shallots. At Longo's, they have both. You can choose, but if you have to choose one, always go with these guys. They're just, I don't know, they just have a lot more sweetness and a little bit better flavor. So we're just going to cut this up into little pieces. So cut it in half and then into chunks. So I just cut it in half lengthwise and then just cut it into fairly big pieces. This is actually going to cook for quite some time. So the shallots will actually get nice and soft. We don't have to worry about making tiny, tiny little pieces. So we take our shallots and we put them in the middle of our sheet of parchment paper. So sheet of parchment, break them up a little bit, just like that. And then we take our potatoes. So these are little tiny mini potatoes. Again, from Longo's, this beautiful, beautiful potatoes. I love them when they're this tiny. The skin is where all the flavor is. The skin is where all the nutrients are. So we're not going to peel them. We're just going to take the tiny guys and throw them onto the parchment paper as well. Now, if they're not all this small, you get some bigger ones. You can see the size. They won't cook at the same rate. So if you get any big ones, you can just cut them in half. So I'm just going to cut these big guys in half, and it doesn't have to be, it's not brain surgery. We don't have to have perfect little cuts. This is a rustic little element to the dish. So once they're all in the middle here, we take a sprig of rosemary, and we're not going to pick it. We're not going to chop it. We're just going to throw it onto the pile of potatoes. A little drizzle of olive oil, and when I say olive oil, I always mean extra virgin olive oil. You don't ever need to use bad olive oil. You should never use bad olive oil. If you're going to cook, you might as well cook well. So use good ingredients, and your food will be much better, and your guests will thank you for it. I'm going to add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. So just a little sprinkle, not too much. We don't want to overpower the dish. We don't want it too salty, but we just throw a little bit of salt on there, a couple turns of pepper, and now we basically fold this up like you're making a burrito. So you fold it in half. I'll turn it so you can see, and you just roll it up. Once you get about halfway, you fold up the side, and you keep on rolling. It doesn't have to be pretty. You just want it fairly tight, all squished down like that. Now we grab a sheet of tin foil. This is the giant, I can't even fit it into the image. These are the really long of tin foil. Beautiful, beautiful product from Longo's that I always go and buy. I don't like the short little pieces of tin foil. I always find them too small. So the big, long Alcan grilling tin foil, it's a lot thicker too than the other tin foil that you'll find. So if you find it, buy it. Now we do the same thing. We just wrap into a little package. And again, we don't have to worry about it being too pretty. There's not a lot of liquid that's coming out of here. We don't have to like make it watertight. Just a nice little package like that. Now that that's done, all we do is we throw it on the barbecue. That's all you have to do. Place it on the barbecue, let it sit there. It takes 20 minutes. The size, those size of potatoes will probably take about 20 minutes to cook. So we're just going to get that started while we work on everything else. So shrimp scampi, as I said, it's sort of an Italian North American kind of dish. The word scampi refers to little. They're also called lagostine. They're like little. They're more like a lobster than they are like a shrimp. They're like little tiny, tiny lobsters. And that's what was this dish was based on, was cooking the little scampi in butter and garlic and wine. When Italian cooks came here to North America, lagostine don't exist. You can't get, well, now you can get them flown in, but in the 50s, post Second World War, you couldn't find them. So people substituted, chefs started substituting the shrimp, but preparing them in the same way. So it's sort of match of Italian North American dish. And having said that, there's a million different ways to prepare this dish. So some people put tomatoes into the sauce. Some people put like bread the shrimp before they cook them. There's no real right or wrong way to do this because it's not a dish that dates back 2,000 years. As long as it's heavy on the garlic, heavy on the butter, you can pretty much call it a scampi, a shrimp scampi, and get away with it. I learned this from my zio Ferruccio, who always used to cook this. Every Christmas Eve, we would have a mountain of it. So I do it his way. So this is my zio Ferruccio's way of doing scampi. So a couple other things that we're going to serve with the shrimp are some mushrooms, some asparagus. So I'm using mushrooms because the mushrooms add a really nice flavor to this dish. If you're doing just the shrimp and you're adding a little bit of vegetables, the mushrooms gives it some depth, gives it some body, gives it some richness, which is important to the dish. If not, it's just a bunch of grilled shrimp. And I'm using a little bit of asparagus because it's asparagus season. So we want to enjoy the asparagus when it's in season. Um, I just went out and selected some really big pieces. So when you're looking at the bunches of the asparagus, at Longo's, there's a table that's bigger than my bed of asparagus. So I just went through and picked out the biggest pieces of asparagus that I could find. And the reason is we want big chunky pieces when we're finished. So really large diameter asparagus. And to prep them, what we're going to do is trim off the stalks. So we take the stalks. There's that old trick where you just kind of hold it and you bend it and it breaks wherever, the woody part of the asparagus starts. That doesn't really work too well because it depends where you hold it. It's going to break halfway in between your two fingers. So I just kind of look for the coloring. You can see there's like a little bit of purple hue to the bottom part of the. So when you see that purple kind of end, that's where you cut. Now, when I cut asparagus, I'm kind of, I don't know, every chef has their thing. My thing is cutting asparagus like that. I dislike it when asparagus is cut straight. I always cut it on an angle. I cut it on a bias like that. I just think it looks a lot prettier, and it is kind of a show this dish. The asparagus is a big part of this dish, so we want to make sure that it looks pretty. For the mushrooms, to prep the mushrooms, it's very, very easy. So these are little cremini mushrooms. I get this all the time. Why can't I wash mushrooms? They're so dirty. Don't wash mushrooms. Don't ever put mushrooms in water. If you put mushrooms in water, what happens is they absorb all the water. And then when you go to cook them, they're more water and they just get mushy and slimy and not very nice at all. So the proper way to clean a mushroom is, best way is with a little brush to go in and brush it all off. The problem with doing that is it's very time consuming. And when you're doing that, you're sort of brushing dirt all over your cutting board and all over your food. So the best way to do it is to just peel it. So if you take your mushroom and you just pop out the little stem. Now the stem, you can keep it, use it for vegetable stock, you can chop it up, cook it however you want. But if you have the cremini mushrooms, you can see all the dirt that's like trapped right down inside. We want to make sure that's all out. So the only way to ensure that is to peel your mushroom. So if you just go in with your thumb and peel up the little bottom piece, the skin peels off very, very, very easy. If they're nice and cold, they better. And you have a nice peeled mushroom. And because you've removed all the skin, you've removed all the dirt. So you have a nice, beautiful little peeled mushroom. If there's a tiny bit of skin, it's not the end of the world. The other reason I like to peel mushrooms, especially when I'm grilling, is because the grill. The skins are very dry. So if you put them onto the grill with the skins on, then the skins will burn before the mushroom is actually cooked. So that's it. It takes all of 3 seconds to peel a mushroom. And we have a beautiful little peeled mushroom. Those are our 2 vegetables. And we're going to cook these first. So before I go any further, any questions out there, Astrid?
Hi, Chef. Yes, there are a couple of questions. So first of all, can you replace the shrimp scampi with other types of fish? Can you give us some suggestions?
I mean, you can grill anything. Something for this dish that holds up really well to all the garlic would be like a branzino, a bass, like a sea bass, something white and something fairly meaty would work really well. Swordfish works really well with this dish. I mean, grilled swordfish is, I love it. It's a fantastic, fantastic fish on the grill. Meatiness that can hold up to it.
And then we have a couple of more technical questions. Why do you need parchment paper as well as tin foil for your vegetables, the potato and the shallots that you use?
So if you do it without the parchment paper, then the potatoes stick like crazy to the tin foil. So the parchment paper just basically as a barrier so that the potatoes don't burn and they don't stick to the foil.
Okay, and is there any particular reason why you put the shiny side on the inside?
No, there's absolutely no difference. The only reason one side is shiny and one side is not on aluminum is the way it comes off of the rollers during the production of the aluminum foil.
I have a couple of questions in regards to the mushrooms. The recipe called for oyster mushrooms. Is there any particular mushroom that you should use? Why did you choose cremini today?
You can do because the creminis look the best. So with this dish, the king oyster mushrooms or the cremini mushrooms, they have a very similar sort of texture. They're both firm sort of mushrooms. So I use one of those 2 always. You could get away with doing like regular oyster mushrooms. That's not going to ruin anything. It'll definitely work. Any mushroom that's on the sweeter side. You don't want to use like a portobello mushroom. They're too meaty. A portobello is just a giant cremini anyway, but it has too much mushroom flavor. These are softer and sweeter. Same with the king mushrooms or an oyster mushroom.
There's also a question in regards to the shrimp. There's usually some numbers on the shrimp on the packaging. Could you just explain maybe what they mean? Sometimes it says 16, 20 or 21, 25. What does that mean?
Okay, so the numbers that are on packages of shrimp, that's a universal sizing guide. So the shrimp have a number that refers to the pieces per pound. So if you see 1620, that means there's 16 to 20 pieces in 1 pound. 2125 means there's 21 to 25 in a pound. So the larger the number, the smaller the shrimp. So the largest ones you can get are U10, which is under 10 pieces per pound. And then you go 16, 20, 21, 25, 25, 32. So the larger the number, the smaller the shrimp. It's the same with scallops as well. So that just refers to the size of the actual shrimp. Wonderful technology. Okay, so now I'm good. Yes.
Just one more question for the shrimp. Is it better to use fresh or frozen?
I mean, the frozen products nowadays are pretty wonderful. Frozen, they're all done like on the boats as soon as they're caught in their IQF. They're individually quick frozen. So the quality frozen is wonderful. The problem with fresh in Canada here, there's really not a lot available in Toronto that's fresh. And if you do find it, astronomically expensive. So I always just buy frozen. Most people, yeah, most restaurants just deal with frozen. It's a quality product. You don't have any issues with it at all.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start grilling the asparagus. So I'm just putting it right onto the grill. And again, I'm on medium heat. And this is one thing that uh, I find a lot of people make mistakes with. When they're grilling and when they're buying barbecues, they're trying to, they always worry about BTUs. They worry how many BTUs, how hot can the barbecue get. Barbecues don't need to be hot. Barbecues are very, very misunderstood products. You should never cook on very high heat. There's rarely an application where you're cooking over very, very high heat. So medium heat, put the asparagus on, just kind of keep an eye on them. They only take a few minutes. Same with the mushrooms. We're going to take the mushrooms, and because we poured the olive oil into the bell side, like where the gills are of the mushroom, we didn't put it on the top side. We put it on the bottom side of the mushroom. We just place these onto the grill with the top of the mushroom on top of the grill. So once this goes on, we don't really too much. We just wait until you see water boiling in the middle of the mushroom. Once you see some water kind of coming up through the middle of the mushroom cap, then your mushroom is done. It's really, really quite simple. I'll move the camera to see it when it's a very, very simple, easy process. Now, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on our sauce, the actual Scampi sauce. So the Scampi sauce is very easy. Small pot, put a couple tablespoons of butter into it. So unsalted butter. I always use unsalted just so that I can control the amount of salt later. We put equal portions of olive oil. So about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of butter. And now we're going to put a little bit of chopped garlic in here. So it's on the stove, or sorry, on the grill. And we're going to talk a second about garlic. So when we're prepping our garlic, this is something that is very important. I take every opportunity I can to tell people how to prep garlic, because quite often garlic is so mistreated, it makes me want to cry. So when you take a clove of garlic, you should never put it on a cutting board and mash it with a knife or put it through a garlic press. That destroys everything that is beautiful about garlic. The proper way to treat a piece of garlic is to cut it with a knife. So I'm trimming off the root, just a tiny bit of the root of the garlic. And then I'm just going to cut it in half. So all down, but not all the way through. I kind of stop a little bit short of the tip. That way, when you open it up, the skin comes off in one piece. And it comes off very, very easy. It takes about 5 seconds to clean a head of garlic. Now, when you open it up, it's important that we cut it in half, because you see all that little sprout that's on the inside, that green nastiness. That is very hard for a lot of people to digest. Quite often when you eat garlic and then you keep tasting garlic for hours and hours and hours, that's because this little shoot was included in your meal. So garlic is a seed, and it's trying to grow. So when this starts to happen, all the energy is going into this little shoot, and it starts to develop chlorophyll. Quite often they're green, and it's not nice. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't look good. It makes your dishes go green, kind of. So just take a couple seconds. It doesn't take very long to do this, to remove the little stem, the little shoot that's inside the garlic. That's all it takes. So once we have our garlic like this, we can cut it up nice and thin. So I'm going to do pieces of garlic, and I'm going to add them to the mushroom. So you can do this before, you can do it after, it doesn't really matter. But I'm just going to drop a piece of garlic into the center of each one of the mushroom caps. So you can see Okay, so you can see here, see how this mushroom right here has got all this water in it? See how I just poured out all that water? That's when you know it's getting really close to being cooked. So I'm just going to rotate these so we get marks. Put that back there. And put a little piece of garlic into each one. So our potatoes, I'm just going to flip it over. You don't have to flip it, but why not? Throw a little piece of garlic into our mush, and our sauce is coming along nice. It's starting to boil, but it's a nice gentle boil. Again, my barbecue's not on high. My barbecue's actually less than halfway. So easy, gentle heat. It'll be wonderful. Move that around. And we're just going to take a look at our asparagus. Go in, flip them over. You don't want them too dark. You want a little bit of color on them. Charring them so that they're completely black. I just find the flavor not too nice. So quick flip and let them cook again. The less you agitate it, the better off you are. So while all this is cooking, now we're going to get to the shrimp. So we're doing the shrimp last because it's the quickest thing out of all of these ingredients to cook. It really is quick to cook. It doesn't take long at all. So I'm going to take my shrimp out and we're going to do a quick lesson on shrimp, on how to clean shrimp, how to handle shrimp. Any questions before we get into shrimp?
Yes. So one question, how many BTUs are okay for a barbecue?
Sorry, say that again.
How many BTUs are okay for a barbecue?
I don't know. When I buy barbecues, I'm more interested in how cool it can be as opposed to how hot it can get. You only need it hot for the first 5 minutes to get the grills warm. So the number is I don't know. It's 80,000 is ridiculous. I've seen 80,000 BTU barbecues, which is ridiculous. If you know what you're doing and you have a little bit of patience, then you can cook on a BTU with a barbecue with 10,000 BTU and be fine. If you know what you're doing, which is basically what you're going to learn if you pay attention for the next 4 weeks here.
And then there's a question for the garlic. How?
Any other questions? Or?
What's the best way to store garlic? Did you hear me, Chef?
Okay, so garlic's a fun one. Garlic is often misstored, and that's why you'll get those little sprouts growing on the inside. So garlic needs to have a little bit of air circulation, and it needs to be dark because, again, it's a seed. It wants to grow. So you can keep it in your fridge. There's nothing wrong with keeping it in your fridge, but you just have to, as soon as it comes out of the fridge and out to room temperature, it's going to want to grow. So take out a clove, or 2 or 3 or 5, whatever you need, cut it right away and use it right away. If you leave it out in your counter, yeah, it'll start to want to grow again. So in your fridge is okay in a paper bag, not an airtight bag. Fridges tend to be quite humid, so the humidity will also lead to moldiness. So it's not perfect. It's not the best way.
Do the mushrooms. So if you look at the mushrooms, all the water has sort of come out, and they're full of little mushroom juice. That's what you want. You don't want to flip it over. You want to keep that juice in there because as it cools down, now that it's come off, once it cools down, it will absorb all the liquid back into the mushroom. So that's there. We're going to move on to our shrimp. So our shrimp, I've taken the opportunity to skewer a few already so you didn't have to wait. So we have the 1620 little zipper backs. So these are called easy peel or zipper back shrimp. And that means that the shells have already been cut off of the back and the vein has already been removed. So to prep these, it's It's really simple. You just go in, you grab the shell, and we peel it off. So these are a frozen product. They were just thawed in the fridge. I took them out this morning when I woke up, and they're ready to go. So we just quickly peel off a bunch of shrimp, and because they've already been split and because the vein is already gone, that's all the prep that we have to do to them. When you do this, you always want to open it up. You always want to make sure that you get the vein out of the inside of the shrimp. Quite often, even though they're split open, I'd say 1 in 25, 1 in 30, the vein will still be in there, so you just need to remove it. Once we have those done, we are going to skewer them. So skewering shrimp, there's a little trick that I learned after 25 years of being in a restaurant that I'm going to share with you guys, and it is really quite simple. If you take a skewer and you put a shrimp onto the skewer, when you go to cut it or cook it, it has a tendency to do this. It has a tendency to like slide around on the barbecue as you're moving it around. So the best way to prevent that is do your first skewer, line them all up, skewer them all, and then you do 7 per skewer. And I like to have them facing all the same way. I don't know, it's just me. You don't have to, but I like the symmetry of it all. So we have one skewer all the way through, and we're just going to put a second skewer. So the second skewer just helps you control it on the barbecue. The shrimp won't slide around, they won't flip around as you're grilling. So it just makes life a lot easier on the barbecue. It only takes, an extra 10, 15 seconds to skewer the second skewer, and it will make your life, like I said, 1,000 times easier when it comes time to actually grill it. So now to prep this, all we have to do is do a little drizzle of vegetable oil. Let me wash my hands first. And again, because this is coming in contact with the actual grill, I'm going to use veg oil as opposed to olive oil. Most of the flavor in this dish comes from the sauce anyway, so we don't have to really worry too much about getting too much flavor into the shrimp before we start cooking. Our asparagus is coming off the grill, and our shrimp is getting ready to go on the grill. So the shrimp are on the grill. Again, medium heat. They only take about 2 minutes per side. They're not, it doesn't take a ton of time to actually make this. So just watch the shrimp. They'll start to tighten up, they'll start to curl. An important part of skewering the shrimp, which I did forget to mention, is you want to leave some space between the shrimp. You don't want to pack them too tightly on the skewer, or else the heat can't penetrate in and cook the little spaces in between each shrimp. If they're packed too tight, it just doesn't work that well. So I'm going to let those cook, and in the meantime, I'm going to finish my sauce. So we put a little bit of wine into our sauce, and we let that boil down. So right now, all we have is the garlic, the butter, the oil, and a little splash of wine. And we let that simmer for a little bit. So everything is cooking. Perfect time for a couple questions if we have any.
Yes, Chef, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So we had a lot of questions in regards to the skewers. Did you have to soak them in water before you use them?
No, so I didn't soak them in water because they're only on the grill for 3-4 minutes. So because it's a very quick cooking time, you don't have to worry about the skewers burning. That's why you soak them in water, is to prevent them from burning. If you're cooking lamb, yeah, soak them because they're going to be on the grill for 20 minutes.
Okay, did you put anything else on the shrimps besides the oil?
Oh, salt and pepper.
So you added salt, okay.
So you flip them when They're nice and pink like this, okay? Don't wait for them to get too dark. If they get too dark, too red, they'll be dry. So you just want lightly pink. You remove them from the grill and get ready to plate.
There's also a question in regards to your barbecue. You always keep your lid open on your barbecue. Is there any particular reason why?
Yeah, that's just how I'm used to cooking. So as a chef, I worked in restaurants for a long time, and we don't have lids on our grills. Barbecuing is a unidirectional method anyway. It's like heat is blasting up from the bottom. So I never close my lid. When you close your lid, you're just making an oven, basically. So I always cook with the lid open unless I'm doing, I don't know, ribs or something that takes a very long time where I basically want to use it as an oven anyway. But for all this out of the new quick little cooking, yeah, always lid open. You can see it. You don't have to open the lid, see what's going on. And it's a consistent temperature when the lid is open. When you're cooking and you have it on medium heat, as soon as you close the lid, that chamber gets really hot. Then you open the lid, and the chamber gets cold again. Then you close the lid, it gets hot. So keeping it open, nice and even, consistent temperature, is just a lot easier to control.
Okay. So we're done all our cooking now. So I'm just removing the shrimp from the grill, and what we're going to do now is just toss very quickly in the sauce that we've made. So our sauce is done because the wine is boiled off, and all we're doing now is we're going to put a little bit of the sauce on top of the shrimp. We just basically want to coat all the shrimp with our sauce. We don't want to use all of the sauce because we want a little bit of it for plating, but we just slide off onto right into our pot. You don't have to worry too much about it, and just give it a quick little stir so that they're all in the sauce. Your sauce is quite hot, your shrimp are quite hot, so you don't have to worry about anything getting cold. Our potatoes. So we're going to open up. Wow. It's going to be steamy. It's going to be hot. So be careful. And here are our little potatoes. So you can see they're nice and soft. The rosemary, the scent of the rosemary, you guys can't smell it, but it's this beautiful scent of rosemary and shallots. And now it just comes down to the plating. So to plate all of this, I'm just going to take a little plate and take some of the nice big pieces of asparagus. So I'm going to select the largest ones that I have, and I'm just going to trim them a little bit. I don't want the asparagus to be any larger than the shrimp, because the shrimp is sort of the showcase, right? We want the shrimp to be the pretty part. So I'm just going to trim them down into little pieces. And again, I'm cutting them on an angle. I just think it's a little bit prettier. So a couple pieces of asparagus trimmed. We have our potatoes. We have our mushrooms here. So we just put it together on a plate. So here's our plate. Now, I always start with the other stuff, meaning the pieces of asparagus and the potatoes. Leave the shrimp to last because you want them to stay kind of warm. So I'm going to leave them in the sauce where they're happy and hot. And then we take our mushrooms, which have sort of dried out a little bit now because they've absorbed all of the water back into them. And we just place them on the plate. I use these little tweezers. You can use your fingers if you want to plate, or you can just pile it into a big pile. Doesn't really matter. And then we just place our in the center and kind of pile it up a little bit. You want some height. You want to be able to see the shrimp from across the dining room, as I always used to say. So a nice little pile of shrimp. And we're just going to top it off with a little sprinkle of parsley, just to make it look a little bright. And I'm going to use a little bit of the actual sauce. So back to the pot, I'm just going to pull up a little bit of the sauce and drizzle that around the plate. You want to see some of the oil, some of the sauce. This is why we don't do too much work with the asparagus and the mushrooms as far as flavor goes, because it all comes from the sauce. So once the sauce is on top of the asparagus and the mushrooms, all of your flavor. Last thing to put on are just a couple little pieces of potatoes. So this is sort of a nice little appetizer. You could turn this into an entree. That doesn't take much. You just put a little more stuff on there, and it becomes a wonderful entree. But the dish is, you don't have to deal with technical audio problems. This dish is super easy. All the ingredients, like I said, available at any Longo's. Nothing technically difficult about what we did here today. Just technology. Any questions, Astrid?
Yes, chef. Could you talk to us about the wine that you used for your sauce, and also if there's any suggestions on wines that you can pair the dish with?
Yeah, this I always go with a Pinot Grigio. It's sort of my go-to wine with shrimp scampi because it has enough acidity and enough body to hold up to all the garlic and the butter that's going on in here. So yeah, that's my go-to, is a good Pinot Grigio. And that's the same wine that I used in the sauce. And that's sort of a good rule of thumb whenever you're cooking. The whole idea of cooking wine, you get a bad bottle of wine from someone, I'll use it as cooking wine. Don't do that. You wouldn't use rancid butter to cook it. You use bad wine. So always cook with the wine that you're going to serve with the dish. It helps tie all the flavors together, and it'll be of a better quality than if you're just using some plunk that you found in the back of your cantina.
We also have a question, a more general question on the barbecue. So when you use the barbecue, should you, so in order to avoid the meats and the seafood from sticking, should you use some oil on the grill grates or just on the meat and fish itself?
I don't oil my grills. I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people swear by it, but I never do. I just oil my product. Now, to prevent things from sticking to the grill, the greatest thing that you can do is ensure that the difference in temperature between your cooking surface and your product are as large as possible. That means make sure your grill is hot and make sure your products are cold. If your products are very cold when you go to cook, chances are it won't stick. If it's room temperature, it's more likely to stick. So make sure your products are cold, make sure your grill is hot, and you shouldn't have to use oil on your grill. The reason I don't oil the grill is because it just burns on the grill, and then you get that flavor of burnt oil as opposed to the charring, the Maillard effect that you want from the meat.
We're talking about the cooking classes. If you can just tell us a little bit about the loft cooking classes that you did.
So yeah, the loft cooking classes, it was awesome. I've done a lot of classes in a lot of different cooking schools in my years, and the people to loft were wonderful. The assistants that were in there were better cooks than, I'd say, 50% of the cooks who have worked for me over the years. So they know what they're doing. They're incredibly gracious, and the spaces are beautiful. I've been a big fan of it ever since I had the opportunity to cook there. So there's a lot of options for people out there to do cooking classes, but honestly, and I'm not saying that just because because I'm doing this with Longo, it really means that the guests are going to be happy eating. So yeah, pretty cool place.
Yes, thank you, Isabella, for changing the shot. I just wanted to ask to see the plate one more time because it looked so delicious. We also had another question. If you could just briefly explain what the cantina was when you were talking about the garlic.
A cantina is like, where old Italian men keep their wine and their sausage. It's usually a cool part of the basement that is dedicated to wine and preserves cured meats. So any little cold corner of your house in the basement is a great place to store garlic.
Another question asking what part of Italy you're from.
Oh, I'm from just about an hour south of Milano, near Piacenza, the next biggest town over. So it's right over the border in Emilia Romagna, but it's like 10 minutes I can walk to Lombardia. So just about an hour south of Milano.
And then I have another question in regards to the oil that you used. Can you just tell us the difference between canola oil and grapeseed oil?
So canola oil and grapeseed oil, sunflower oil, like they're all vegetable-based oils, and they're all good because they have a really high smoke point. But I usually, I like canola because it has a very, very flavor, and it has a much higher smoke point. So the difference basically is they all have a tiny bit of flavor difference, but unless you're sitting there tasting them with a spoon side by side, you wouldn't really notice. They're just a good cooking oil because the oil acts not so much as a flavoring, but as a method of transferring heat. So you want an oil that is resistant to high heat. So vegetable oils usually work the best for that.
Great, thank you, Chef.
You're welcome.
So far, I think we're good for questions.
Sure. Because yeah, now the phones are working at least. Ah, wonderful. Okay, so that was shrimp scampi. Like I said, kind of it's in Italian cuisine, but kind of North Americanized. And don't be afraid to play with this. Again, I used mushrooms because I love mushrooms and shrimp. I used asparagus because it's in season. I used the mini potatoes because just to bulk up the dish a little bit and give it some body. But you can play with this. You can have fun with it. Use any vegetables that you like. Zucchini works wonderful with this dish. If you get some little baby zucchini and grill and then just cut them up into small pieces, put it on there. Peppers work great if you like peppers. Any little vegetable that you feel looks good in the aisles at the Longos, grab it, grill it, put it on the dish with the garlic. There's very few vegetables that don't work well with garlic and butter. There's very few things that don't work well with garlic and butter. So don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to play. If you guys, I know we had a lot of technical difficulties. If there's a lot of questions that you want to get in, if you missed some questions, just go on Instagram at Roberto Fracchioni. Send me a direct message and I'll answer any questions that you have. I'm here to help you guys become wonderful cooks, so feel free to ask any questions that you have at all.
So much, Chef, for this cooking class. I hope you enjoyed this Tutti Tavola class as much as I did. Our chef gave us a very informative and fun class as usual. And I would like to thank you, Astrid and Isabella, who made this class happen. And thank you also to our colleagues at the Chamber. A special thank you goes to the Longos, the Loft at Longos. We look forward to welcoming you next week to prepare a grilled steak and polenta with burrata with Chef Roberto. Arrivederci. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you all next Tuesday. Thank you so much.